Does it matter what time I eat? Don't eat carbs, don't eat protein. Okay, actually, no, some protein, but then don't eat fats. Unless they're the type of fats that are good for you. It's like, what? Nah. I've had enough. I need a break from all this confusing and contradictory advice about what to eat. What I want to know is, even if I don't change what I eat, but then I change when I eat, can I improve my health that way? So can just changing my meal times actually make me healthier? Now, this experiment looked at the effect of eating breakfast an hour and a half later than you normally would in the morning, and then eating dinner an hour and a half earlier than you normally would in the evening, meaning that overnight you had an extra 3 more hours of fasting. Previous studies on mice and rats showed that by actually bringing their meal times closer together, it actually helped them lose weight and have lower levels of cholesterol and blood sugars. So, we know it works on mice and rats, but will it work on guinea pigs? These 16 guinea pigs were the very first human volunteers to undergo this test in a pioneering 10-week study. They graciously allowed the different types of fats in their bodies, their cholesterol levels, and their blood sugar levels to be measured throughout this experiment. So the blues got to eat their meals as normal, which meant early breakfast eating and eating as late as they like, including late night snacks. But the reds had their meal times restricted, which meant no late night nibbles for them. So Dr. John Johnson, pretty solid name if I may say so, ran the study. Results are in.
Well, it's good news for the restricted time feeding group, who ended up looking healthier in some of our measures. Firstly, they had lower percent body fat. Secondly, they had lower fasting blood sugar. And thirdly, they had lower fasting blood cholesterol.
Wow.
And that is unanimous, people. And it's actually very interesting because these are major risk factors for a lot of Western diseases such as heart disease and even diabetes. So tell us, John Johnston, what's going on here?
So there are probably 2 possible explanations for this at the moment. My personal favourite, because of my research interest, is that you're eating at a time of day when your body metabolism rhythms are expecting you to be eating food. So your body can deal with those calories more efficiently than if you eat, for example, during the night. However, these guys have also had a longer fasting duration every day. And it may be that the fasting in itself is having some important effect. At the moment, we just don't know, but I think it's great that we're actually seeing some positive results.
Now, although this was just a small study, similar results have been produced elsewhere. And basically, the fact is, when it comes to metabolism and fat burning, your organs tend to do this when they know there's no more food coming to your body. So if you can increase this period of fasting, mostly when we're asleep, you can actually burn more fats. Now guys, so try not to get too bogged down by this and stick to some super hyper rigid regime. Because at the end of the day, there are things that are going to get in the way. So the major thing to take away from this is that maybe eating breakfast slightly later and eating dinner slightly earlier can burn you a couple more fats. But I'm not done yet. So, if we know that changing meal times can make this much of a difference, what I want to know now is, should I be eating before or after exercise? It's not even about exercising anymore. This is about finding out whether or not we could turn our bodies into more efficient fat burning machines. So, brother and sister Josh and Jess were the willing lab rats this time. So what they did was 30 minutes of exercise on an empty stomach.
Starving.
Ravenous.
Dr. Adam Collins then measures how much fat their bodies burn.
What we're monitoring here is the fuels that is burning during exercise. So when you're exercising, you are using a combination of glucose, which is a carbohydrate, or fat. So what we're interested in is the impact of exercise after the exercise is finished, because that's when you do most of your fat burning. So most of the effect of that exercise actually happens in the period after the exercise rather than during it.
So then, Josh and Jess get their breakfast in liquid form, yummy, to calculate exactly how much their calorific input is. A week later, they basically did the same thing, but this time they ate before exercise. And the results are a little bit weird, because the results were actually different for Josh and Jess. So, Josh actually burned 10% more fat whilst exercising on an empty stomach. But for Jess, it was the reverse. She actually burned more fat exercising on a full stomach. This suggests there's actually a difference between men and women. So to test this on a bigger scale, we went back and teamed up with Adam Collins to get 31 volunteers to undergo a 4-week experiment.
Prior to this, I probably had the fitness levels of a pork scratching, but now I feel like a much fitter, much more lively, healthier pork scratching.
And amazingly, the results were replicated. So with the women, they actually improved by 22% more after exercising when they'd eaten. But with the men, they actually improved 8% more by exercising before they'd eaten. So what's going on here? Well, it's new findings, so it's still being worked out, but it's believed that it's down to how the different sexes handle the foods we use as fuel, such as carbohydrates and fats.
Both men and women will store carbohydrate in muscle, and men have more muscle than women, so they have got a greater capacity to store and utilize carbohydrate. So they're really designed to burn carbohydrate preferentially compared to women.
So basically, men are generally built to burn carbs. So if we eat before we exercise, we're more likely to burn the carbs than burn the fat. So it's beneficial for us to exercise on an empty stomach, meaning you're going to be burning more fats. However, for the women, in general, they have more fat than men. So exercising after they've eaten is more beneficial for them for burning fats. So it could really make a big difference when you eat. Equally, it's important to keep a healthy perspective about this. Yes, these are intriguing, very interesting findings, and they can be used as a general rule of thumb. However, when the time is right for a late night snack or a late night pizza, you'll know. Staying in shape. It's tough, but does it have to be? 1,000. What I want to know is, can you get fit by doing absolutely nothing? So as a doctor, exercise is very, very important for me. I know the benefits physically and mentally. I need it to keep me going. However, it's very, very difficult sometimes. I could be going to and from hospital and I don't often have the time. So are there any handy shortcuts? Can you cheat yourself into shape without all the hard work? Can you think yourself stronger? I know this sounds pretty lazy, but neuroscientists are actually looking into this. What they looked at was how our muscles could get stronger by just thinking of exercising them. They start by seeing how strong people's calf muscles are, similar to those leg press things you see at the gym. Hey, never skip leg day. Then by using ultrasound and zapping the leg with electrical impulses, you can actually identify what part of the muscle you're actually using. Then the fun part. The volunteers are actually trained in the art of just thinking about doing the leg exercises.
It's not just about picturing yourself in the chair and seeing your foot and seeing the force trace. It's also about the sensation of the brace against your ankle. Each session will be about 15 minutes.
The group of volunteers then train hard over the next 4 weeks, and the results are pretty staggering.
What we showed was an increase of approximately 20% in our ability to activate the muscle.
Pretty great, huh? All from the power of the mind.
Well, the mental imagery is a rehearsal of the skill. So you're better at recruiting the muscles in an orderly fashion so that we can activate a larger percentage of the muscle, and that then produces more force and we become stronger.
So the volunteers, their muscles didn't actually get any bigger. However, they were able to utilize more of the muscle they already had. So there you go. You can make your muscles stronger with just your mind. No exercise, just mind force. So what other different cheat ways can we get stronger and get into super athletes without actually having to move? Now, there's some great research that actually suggests you can get the same benefits that you do from exercise from a bathtub. So what I want to know, and bear with me on this one, Is a bath actually better than exercise? This isn't something that I just dreamt up. It too has some science behind it.
There's a very big study came out of Finland where they showed that increased rates of sauna use in the wider population actually resulted in a reduction in markers of cardiovascular disease risk, but also overall cause of mortality.
So are the Scandinavians onto something with hot tubs and saunas? And can a hot bath really give you the same benefits as exercise? Well, scientists from Loughborough University actually put this research to the test. They compared getting hot with exercise to getting hot in a bath. They want to see how well people actually control their glucose levels, which is something in medicine we know is key for good health and actually normally helped by exercise. Ready for bath time? Not quite the candlelit spa that they had in mind. I guess it turns out that the baths they use for scientific research aren't quite as cozy as the ones we have with the candles and the rubber duckies at home, eh? They were kept at a toasty 40 degrees for 1 hour while their blood sugar levels and calories were monitored and measured. The mask they're wearing measures the calories they're burning as they get hot. To compare, they also sweated it out on an exercise bike for 1 hour. So what they looked at was the energy used up whilst the volunteers were actually having a bath.
What we found was about an 80% increase in energy expenditure just as a result of sitting in the bath for the course of an hour.
So lying in a hot bath like this one can actually burn calories, an extra 61 to be precise. And it's a lot less tasking than running around on any exercise bike, I can tell you that. So what about blood sugar levels and that all-important peak glucose measurement that you often get after you've had a big meal?
Where we started to see differences is when you look at your peak glucose output. And the key thing that's important about peak glucose output is it's one of the potential risk markers towards things like developing type 2 diabetes. And what we actually found with the bath versus the exercise is that your peak glucose was actually quite a little bit lower compared to exercise, which was completely unexpected.
So astonishingly, laying in a nice hot bath like this for an hour was 10% more effective in bringing down those peak glucose levels than actually exercising itself. So the question is, why is lying in hot water giving you this benefit?
One of the things that we think is it's down to these things called heat shock proteins that are released in response to a heat stress. These heat shock proteins will take some of the sugar that's in your bloodstream out of the bloodstream and into the muscle.
Honestly, I am loving the sound of this. I love a good reason to jump in a hot bath or kick it in the sauna. I guess maybe we should all be a bit more Scandinavian, eh? Now, these results from these studies are incredible. It seems like you can actually get some of the key benefits of exercise without even having to move at all. And as a doctor, this really makes me enthusiastic because I know how many patients I see that aren't able to exercise like some of us. So yes, as we've seen, the results are pretty staggering. However, this does not give you an excuse not to move. We do know there is no substitute for hard work and real hardcore exercise. We know that exercise gives so many more benefits than just blood sugar levels and calories. Those endorphins you get, the social aspect of going to the gym with your mates, there's no substitute for exercise and hard work. So as soon as we can get out there and it's safe, let's go and get moving. Doctor's orders.
It's not how much you exercise, it's how smart you exercise. 2 experiments, 1 goal. Getting fit, but without all this effort. First up, exercise snacking. And then, how can I do 10 marathons without moving? I'm Dr Emeka, and this is the Slacker's Guide to Exercise. So first up, what is exercise snacking? Well, it's not this, but it could be an easier way to get fit without actually doing more exercise. Okay, let's just get something out there before we start. None of the advice in this film will be not to exercise. Come on guys, I'm an actual doctor, what do you expect? Exercise is good for us, and you know that. However, the stats and data on how many of us regularly exercise, not so good. According to one survey, British people spend almost twice as long on the toilet as we do exercising each week.
Hey, and if you're sitting somewhere abroad laughing at the Brits, pipe down. Lack of exercise is actually a worldwide problem, and there are many good reasons for that, but possibly top of the list is time. The official World Health Organization guidelines suggest that we should be getting at least about 150 minutes of moderate exercise every week, or 5 30-minute sessions. But we're busy people. Well, this small-scale experiment wanted to test that instead of doing a 30-minute block of exercise, can we get the same health benefits if we did 5-minute chunks of exercise once an hour over the whole day? This is what's known as exercise snacking. Volunteers were given one of 3 activities to do.
Walk the walk. Don't you know?
1 was sitting doing no exercise for about 6 hours. 2 was a 30-minute brisk walk. And 3 to do a 5-minute walk every hour for 6 hours. This is known as exercise snacking. Throughout the experiment, they had their blood glucose and blood fats monitored and measured to see which exercise pattern lowered them the most.
Sugars and fats are very important to the human body. We use them as fuel, but it's really important that we maintain them at healthy levels. If our blood sugar starts to rise too much, we're at risk of developing diabetes. Similarly, if our blood fats become too high, we're at risk of increasing heart disease risk.
When the levels of fats and sugars in our blood is high, it's bad for our health. And exercise is so important because it actually uses up these fats and sugars. And the results? Well, compared to doing no exercise, a brisk 30-minute walk lowered these levels by about 40%. No surprise there. That's why the NHS recommends it. However, what was surprising was these levels fell by about 40% when the 30-minute exercise was actually broken into 5-minute chunks and spread throughout the day.
We found very similar results with the exercise snacks. So again, it was around 40% reduction in blood sugar and blood fats.
Now, this experiment was only conducted with a small number of people. However, other research in this area showed similar results, which means that actually 30 minutes of exercise snacking broken down into 5-minute chunks may be just as beneficial as 1 block of exercise, which means it can fit easier around your day, so you can make it work for you.
The reason we actually designed this study was to try and introduce the opportunity of choice. So if you're the kind of person that maybe hasn't got 30 minutes in a day, but does have 5-minute periods during a day, you can still exercise and get the benefits.
Hey, quick time out. How do I know if I'm walking fast enough to actually count as exercise?
So, rule of thumb is you want to be out of breath enough to still be able to hold a conversation, kind of like I am now, but you're not able to sing. La 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 la. Looks like I need to work a little bit harder, huh?
Although the last experiment took into account walking, this is mainly about moderate exercise and raising the heart rate, which can be done in a number of ways. So the measure of being able to talk but not sing is still a rough guide to let you know that you're exercising well enough. Now, I promised you a hack for completing the equivalent of 10 marathons without moving a single inch. And you're gonna wanna sit down for this one, or stand up. Well, actually, that's the whole premise of this whole experiment, because this is sitting down versus standing up. In Britain, on average, we sit down for almost 9 hours per day, and this sedentary lifestyle is leading to a number of different health problems. So, this experiment wanted to see if we can offset that by simply standing up. So, the test itself is quite simple. An office full of people ditched their chairs and stood up for at least 3 hours a day for a whole week.
I'm a little bit worried actually. I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to stand up for all that time.
They then had their heart rate and blood glucose measured. And the results?
If we look at the heart rates, and we can see in the dark yellow line, that is their heart rate and their calorie burn while they're seated.
Just the small act of standing up every day actually raised their heart rates a tiny amount.
And that makes a difference of about 0.7 of a calorie. 0.7 of a calorie. 0.7 of a calorie. 0.7 of a calorie.
However,
if I extend that over 3 or 4 hours of a working day, over a week, over months, over a year, it comes up at about 25 to 30,000 extra calories just by standing up 3 or 4 hours in your day at work.
At least 25 to 30,000 extra calories, which, and you know where I'm going with this, is the equivalent of, drumroll please, 10 marathons. And the benefits of standing up don't just stop there. The blood glucose monitors also showed that you reduce sugars in the blood much quicker if you stand up versus if you're sitting down. So, the message out there is quite clear and simple. If we could try and stand up just a little bit more each day, we can make some huge differences to our overall health. Now, this experiment looked at the difference between sitting and standing. And like the previous experiment with brisk walking, whether it's an injury or disability, a number of people aren't able to stand for long periods of time. And if that's you, I want you to remember that the premise of this experiment is actually raising your heart rate by just a little bit over a long period of time. And remember, this could be done in a number of different ways. So, do check the NHS website on what advice will work for your needs. And for me, I think it's time for a little exercise snack. Oh wait, yeah, I forgot.
There is only one real cure for a hangover: death.
So, like a lot of you, I like a little bit of a drink from time to time. But I feel in the morning after, man, why did I text her? What was I doing? Who was I talking to? Why do I feel so rough? You guessed it, a hangover. What is it and why do we get them? And the question is, can we actually avoid a hangover? So it's pretty obvious. Don't drink, avoid that booze, don't get lost in the sauce. But realistically, that's not gonna work, is it? Whether it's a dry mouth, the headaches, the nausea, them horrible shakes, we're all too familiar of the after effects of a serious drink up.
I suffer badly in the morning. I don't do hangovers really too well at all.
I've had hangovers that lasted 3 days before, and I still never thought to myself, I'm not doing that again.
That one? Yeah.
Sorry.
My solution is usually just lie in bed and pull the blinds down.
So people have been debating this for years and years and years, and everyone has their own idea of what a hangover is. One thing that keeps on coming up is dehydration. And actually, when you think about it, there's some logic to this. So alcohol, like tea or coffee, is what we call a diuretic, which means it makes you pee more, and so you're losing fluid, hence getting more dehydrated. So a lot of people think these symptoms are due to dehydration. The question is, are hangovers just dehydration? Doctors Chris and Zan Van Tulleken decided to put their bodies and their livers on the line to test this, all in the name of science.
So here's what we're going to do this evening. You are going to drink the same amount of liquid as me. You're going to drink, for every vodka and orange I have, you're going to have an orange topped up with a shot of water. So through the evening and all through the night, we're going to collect our urine. And I reckon we'll pee exactly the same amount.
Are we going to collect the urine?
Oh, well.
Funny you should ask.
Funny you should ask. We're going to use these.
And before you guys ask me, no, do not try this at home. Come on guys, these are medical professionals. So that's a pretty straightforward experiment to put it to the test, comparing the same amount of liquid intake, just one alcohol, one not alcohol.
There you go.
I mean, 21 shots versus 3 shots? Surely there's only one winner, right?
We should go dancing. We could go for a little dance. You don't remember any of this? And how do you feel today?
Dry as a bone. Wow. I mean, they look exactly the same. If you weighed them?
In fact, 2.8 litres for me and 2.7 litres for you. So I am more dehydrated.
That is absolutely astounding. I feel incredibly dehydrated. I feel like that's my problem. And I'm wrong.
So this may only be a simple test for 2 people. However, the results are kind of surprising. So clearly, dehydration is only a really small part of the story when it comes to a hangover. So the question is, what actually is a hangover? Now, to take a look at what goes on in our bodies that makes us feel so rough and lousy, we actually have to investigate exactly how the alcohol reacts with our blood.
We find that the blood tests from the bin show that there is a lot of inflammation in the blood, a bit like having a very mild cold or a flu. And I think when people think about it, when you have a very mild flu, it feels quite a bit like a hangover. That inflammation can affect the brain and make you feel slow and have a headache and all the symptoms of a hangover.
Inflammation is a sign that the body's immune system is actually reacting to something foreign. In this case, it's the byproduct of alcohol, acetaldehyde. When we drink large amounts of booze, our bodies respond to this nasty, poisonous byproduct, the acetaldehyde, and actually act as if we're having a mild flu. And this is why we experience some of these side effects and symptoms. So if it's this chemical causing us all these issues, something that we can all break down, why do some people get worse hangovers? The question is, can we actually avoid a hangover? So we all know that annoying person the next morning that just jumps out of bed like a jack in the box. And you're asking yourself, do they experience hangovers like we do? Or are they just coping with it better? For that, we need to look at our genetics. Well, it turns out that we can all have quite different reactions when it comes to alcohol.
After half pint, I'll start to feel the effect kicking in. My eyes get red, my arms, my neck gets red too. Continuous headache throughout the day.
On any social event, I'll go out and I will have easily 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pints.
No real hangover, no real effects.
So alcohol is actually broken down in our bodies by an enzyme into acetaldehyde. That nasty stuff. Yeah, I know. And then further broken down by another enzyme into carbon dioxide and water. And so what comes into play is that different people have different levels of these enzymes in their body. And this comes down to genetics.
We can clearly explain these different experiences with alcohol on the basis of genetic variation.
And you can avoid many things in life, but you cannot avoid your genetics.
Joe, this is where you have a variation in your genes that means that you don't get rid of the acetaldehyde, which is what we're seeing right now looking at you.
So some people have lower levels of this enzyme in their body, so they have trouble getting rid of the acetaldehyde, the nasty stuff, and so experience the effects a bit worse.
This is living genetics. This is a great example. And I think, what Joe's body is doing is telling him to stop drinking. And what we see in people with that slow gene is that if they carry on drinking through it for social pressures, despite the side effects, then they are putting themselves more at risk of liver disease.
Other people who can break down this dangerous stuff a little bit more quickly can actually drink without getting the effects of a hangover. However, the body uses a hangover as a sign to tell you that, hey, your liver's taking in a lot of alcohol and maybe you slow it down a little bit.
The alcohol is still being broken down by the liver, and the breakdown products of the alcohol are what's causing the damage to the liver tissue.
So there are many different theories about a hangover, dehydration, this and that, different types of booze, but it all comes down to our genetics and our enzymes. And the thing we need to remember about a hangover is it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes your body's just telling you, chill out, bro, take it a little bit easy. Which foods are gonna boost my mood? Everyone has that specific comfort food that they go to, right? But this isn't really about, oh, I'm happy because I got ice cream versus I'm sad because I don't have ice cream. It's much deeper than that. This is about the bacteria in our bellies, and that's called the gut microbiome. Scientists say that more than half our bodies is not actually made up of human cells, but made of microbes. I mean, I'm talking bacteria, viruses, fungi. So if you think about it, we're actually more microbe than human. But before you get too alarmed, remember, we think of bacteria as a bad thing. However, there's good bacteria too. And it's the balance of this good bacteria versus bad bacteria that has these scientists so excited. Now, we're only at the very, very beginning of understanding the role bacteria plays in our bodies, but it's already transforming the way we think about diseases like Parkinson's, allergies, and even mental health. And this takes us to Ireland, where scientists are at the forefront of exploring the connection between our mental health and the food that we put in our guts.
Here in the intestines, we have these trillions of microbes. And what we're trying to do is try to understand how our diet is affecting the composition of these microbes to influence what's going on in the brain.
The
large intestine is like a big fermenter producing hundreds or perhaps thousands of molecules, many of which get into the bloodstream and are capable of communicating with the brain.
Research shows that healthy gut bacteria can actually produce neurotransmitters. And these are the small chemicals that send messages in our brain and our nervous system.
We use the term psychobiotic to describe bacteria which have a positive mental health benefit.
So, this raised an intriguing question. Can a diet which increases healthy gut bacteria actually improve our mental health? Can what I put in my gut actually make me happier? So, to test this out, we recruited 8 healthy volunteers with the help of nutritional expert Dr. Kirsten Berding-Harold.
Thank you for coming in today.
Steve and Sean both suffer from stress and anxiety and also eat unhealthily.
At the moment, I do eat a lot of takeaway, very fast food.
A lot of sugary foods. Like for my breakfast this morning, I'd had Nutella and toast.
The volunteers are split into 2 groups. Steve is in the control group and will continue a regular diet, whereas Sean is in the experimental group and will be put on a psychobiotic diet. And this is the diet with the gut bacteria linked to good mental health. This diet consists of 2 main types of foods, prebiotics and probiotics. And this comes from stuff which is foods rich in fiber and fermented foods.
Am I allowed to eat, a takeaway of one night a week or something like that?
So we want you to stay away from the fast food.
Okay.
We want you to eat healthy, homemade food. Takeaway kills your bacteria, so you should stay away from those during the month.
Okay.
They follow these diets for 4 weeks, but not before Steve and Sean give stool samples so we can measure their gut bacteria. And then they're given a mood questionnaire so we can assess their well-being. Then, for the next 4 weeks, half our group will eat normally and half of them will switch to a psychobiotic diet.
Like I would have never eaten whole wheat pasta before. I've never eaten any seeds before, never mind putting them into a dish, so it's definitely a change for me, but it's a good change.
And then it's time to hear the results. First, the bacteria in their gut.
We took a poo sample to look at what was going on in the microbiome, and we found that there was a remarkable change, even in such a short period of time, in the composition of the microbiome. We don't see that in the control diet, unfortunately.
Within 4 weeks of a psychobiotic diet, it's already led to a better mix of healthy bacteria in our volunteers' gut. More good bacteria, less bad. So, question is, how has this affected their mental health?
What we find very clearly that those on the psychobiotic diet have much less stress compared to those on the control diet.
Excitingly, the mood questionnaires showed that our volunteers on the psychobiotic diet felt significantly less stressed. And as a further measure of their mental state, we're actually having their response to stress tested, and their response fell by about 31% on average. Although this was a very small study, the results are consistent with others, and this demonstrates a clear link between the specific foods we eat and our mental health. However, that doesn't mean this is an easy diet to follow. Okay. Ooh. So, let's look deeper into what is a psychobiotic diet and which foods will boost my mood. Prebiotic foods are foods that are rich in fiber and known to help feed healthy gut bacteria. So we're talking about whole grains, onions, leeks, and berries. Probiotics are foods full of healthy bacteria. So we're talking about fermented foods such as kefir, sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi, as well as probiotic yogurts. Unfortunately, we have 3 of them here. We got some kefir, some kimchi, and some kombucha. And I haven't actually tried these, so here's to hoping these are as good on my taste buds as they are to my gut health. Whoa, ha! Well, here's hoping. I feel like some of this may take some getting used to. Delicious. That hits the spot. My gut feels better already. Oh my god. Nah, you have to try this. You have to try this. Yeah.
Honestly, I could just about deal with the kimchi. The 2 drinks are terrible. The key thing to remember here is that our understanding of the gut microbiome and its links to mental health, like many things, is still in its infancy. So make sure you're looking out for new research coming soon. And guys, this doesn't mean you can never ever again have your favorite fast food or cheat meal, but just remember, looking after your gut bacteria is good for not only your body, but your mind as well. Vitamin supplements, big business these days, but what are they actually doing for us? And could they be doing more harm than good?
I didn't expect harm. I expected that I might waste my money.
What I want to know is, are vitamin pills worth the money? So I, as a doctor, know just how important vitamins can be. I know they can be important for connective tissue production and your skin, your hair. Pretty much all the functions in the body need good vitamins. But do we need to take supplements at all? Scientists have been taking a closer look at our food, and you'd be surprised how many different vitamins can be found, even from your classic takeaway.
You get quite a few micronutrients from this. So you need 40 milligrams of vitamin C, and this gives you 13. So you see, there's almost a third of your vitamin C in one of your 3 meals. Perfect. You get a lot of fiber in this meal. You do get some iron, actually. You get some calcium from that meal. So really, this is giving you a broad range of micronutrients. Those curly fries gave her almost 50% of her daily folate.
So it just goes to show that you can get vitamins from almost every type of different food. You don't need an incredibly healthy diet to get these vitamins. You can find them in some foods that you'd never expect. So do we really need to bother supplementing our diets with pills?
I categorically do not think the UK population as a whole should be taking multi-supplements. As a nation, for most micronutrients, when you look at our blood levels, in particular if you exclude certain high-risk groups like adolescents, we are meeting the needs of our body. And there is no evidence that once you meet those needs, more is better.
But even though we may not need them, a number of us are taking multivitamins and vitamin supplementation for a number of different reasons. Vitamin A, hoping to improve your vision. Vitamin B12, hoping to boost your energy. And even vitamin C, hoping to get better skin. So for some reason, a lot of us are actually buying into this. So the question is it legit or is this all just hype? So I have a few supplements here. Let's see what they say. Wellman Original, 29 nutrients to help maintain health and vitality, which supports normal energy release for a hectic lifestyle. And who doesn't want to look like David Gandy, huh? Am I right? Prebiotics, liquid iron and vitamin formula contribute to the reduction of tiredness and fatigue. Super antioxidant, supporting the normal function of a healthy immune system. But what does all this stuff actually mean? The reason some of the terms are so vague is because these are actually food supplements, not medicines. Which means companies can use some pretty clever wording to tell us what they actually mean.
Contribute to normal means that you're having an effect there if your particular measure or your particular health relationship is abnormal. The consumer may not get an effect of these if they're already replete and have enough of the vitamin or mineral already.
This box here has been updated and now says it helps to maintain health and vitality. But that's still pretty vague. We can't argue that a lot of the time vitamins can be a good thing. So if you're lacking vitamin D, supplementing it with vitamin D supplements, or if you're becoming pregnant, taking folic acid we know helps development of an embryo in normal pregnancy. However, these vitamins and supplements are best used when you're actually lacking or deficient in them. And for many of us, even myself, and I'm a doctor, you don't know what you're deficient in. So in theory, to actually get the best benefit of vitamins and supplementation, we don't need to be having regular blood tests and have our own nutritionist. And how many of us have one of those? So if you have a good diet and you're not low in these vitamins, then taking them could actually be pointless. And you could be wasting your time and money. But can these vitamins be hurting more than just your pockets? Can these vitamins actually be dangerous? So green tea, we've all heard of this being good for us. It contains stuff like antioxidants, which can, help prevent cell damage and even reduce the risk of potentially getting cancer. So by getting this in a higher dose and taking it as a supplement, that seems like a good idea, no? Well, unfortunately for 54-year-old Jim McCants in Dallas, the promise of these supplements actually turned into a nightmare.
My dad had a heart attack at age 59 and did not make it. And I was determined to do what I can to take care of myself as best I can so that I don't miss out. And then I saw an article on green tea extract and started taking that.
3 months later, Jim's wife noticed something very worrying.
She looked at me and said, "Do you feel okay?" I said, "Yeah, I feel fine. Why?" "Well, your face is yellow, your eyes are yellow, you look terrible." No, I feel fine. And then when I looked in the mirror, it was shocking.
The next day, Jim was actually admitted to hospital and they found out it was liver damage.
But for the last 30 years, I drank maybe a 6-pack of beer a year, no wine. So alcohol was not a big part of my life. And then my hepatologist drilled into, okay, what about any over-the-counter supplements?
The presumed cause of his liver injury was actually the green tea supplement that Jim had been taking.
I didn't expect harm. I expected that I might waste my money, okay? I may take these and they don't do a bit of good. I can accept that risk, but the risk that it could cause my liver to fail, cause my kidneys to be damaged, that's a risk that's too high for somebody to take.
Now this is a rare case, and unfortunately Jim was actually taking the supplements in large doses. But that's the thing with these supplements, you're actually getting the vitamins in a much higher concentration than you normally would. So the difference between getting these vitamins in food or in pill form can actually be quite important. I know it might sound boring, in many ways supplementation isn't harmful and can be beneficial. But if you're in any sort of doubt, you should be discussing it with your doctor, possibly seeing what you're deficient in or what you don't actually need. As long as you're getting a balanced diet and your regular 5 a day, eat your vegetables, kids, then everything should be good.
A healthy way to get high, 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 high. I knew I was never gonna reach that note. I wanted it, but it wasn't gonna come. Pure bliss. A sense of euphoria. A chemically induced high. What am I talking about? No, not illegal drugs, you mess. I'm an actual doctor. But I am talking about getting high without the harmful downsides of taking illegal drugs. Because the ways I've mentioned to you have been used to describe runner's high. Yes, a state of bliss experienced by many runners. And it seems to be produced by feel-good chemicals which are very similar to cannabis, except we actually produce them naturally within our own brains. And even better, you don't even have to run to trigger these chemicals because singing and dancing can trigger them too.
Dance with me, you're so tutti frutti, sweet as can be.
So, you've probably heard of endorphins, but this isn't even about them. So they used to hog all the credit for that feel-good factor you get after you exercise, until scientists discovered another feel-good chemical that we produce. This is endocannabinoids. So, the question is, what are endocannabinoids? These are natural chemicals that we all produce in our brains, which are actually discovered by accident when scientists were trying to find out why cannabis makes us high. Dr. Saoirse O'Sullivan is one of the leading experts in this field.
They first discovered that there is a specific receptor in the body, so a protein found on the outside of cells to which the chemicals from cannabis combined, and that's what brings about their actions. And once they knew that we have this in our brain, people started looking for what do we make in our body that binds to this, because we don't have proteins and receptors that bind to cannabis for no reason. We must make some chemical in our body that also binds to them that might have similar effects. And it was just a couple of years later that they discovered the first compound that they called an endocannabinoid.
And they're extremely similar in structure. I mean, look at this. The image on the right is a cannabinoid from cannabis, and on the left is an endocannabinoid that we produce in our bodies.
There are a lot of things that we know about endocannabinoids. They improve mood, they reduce anxiety, they help with stress. There are loads of reasons why increasing these chemicals in your brain will have long-term benefits.
So what we know is that endocannabinoids we produce in our body are good for us. But what scientists are just beginning to explore is how we can trigger them in our bodies. So is this what's happening in runner's high? Well, Dr. Saoirse O'Sullivan helped us put this to the test. She sent 3 runners on a relatively easy run and tested their blood before and afterwards to see if there had been an increase in endocannabinoids.
And what we found was when you came back for the run, you had 30% more endocannabinoids in your blood than you did. So exercise seems to stimulate across all of you a big increase in endocannabinoids in your blood.
That just proves what I thought, to be honest with you. More of a runner's bliss rather than a runner's high, maybe.
And this tallies with other studies suggesting that we can produce these endocannabinoids just by running. However, not everyone reports a runner's high, which means a lot more research needs to be done to explore this link. But in terms of endocannabinoids, is runner's high anything like a cannabis high?
So I think probably the big difference is the amount of these chemicals. So you've got a 30% increase, it caused a mood altering effect in you, made you feel better. But if you were to smoke a cannabis cigarette or a joint, you would have a much bigger increase, and that can have a lot of negative impacts on some people as well.
And that's the thing, taking too many cannabinoids can overwhelm our system. But when we can produce endocannabinoids naturally from something, say, like running, that means we can keep them well within the safe limits. Now, I know you're thinking, yeah, Dr. Emeka, I don't like running. No amount of running is gonna make me feel good. Listen, I hear you, I get it. But here's the thing. Now we're gonna find out, can we produce runner's high without actually running? And it's back to pioneering physiologist Dr. Saoirse O'Sullivan to take this a little bit further. She wondered, well, what else gives people this natural euphoria? And can this be linked to endocannabinoids too? So she tested 2 things, singing and dancing. And for this, she used the help of the Derbyshire Rock Choir to test out this theory. Yes, Derbyshire Rock Choir, nice tunes. So the volunteers tried out 4 different activities, singing, dancing, cycling, and then a purposely boring activity designed to give no high whatsoever, reading dishwasher manuals. So they did each activity for 30 minutes and they had their blood levels tested before and after to measure their endocannabinoids. They also had a questionnaire to measure their mood. So did any of these activities actually give them a natural measurable high? Dishwasher manuals. Yep, there was no endocannabinoids rise there. And it actually made their mood even worse. Shocker. Cycling?
So the cycling did cause an increase in endocannabinoids of about 20%. But overall, there wasn't a correlation between how much your mood changed and your endocannabinoid levels.
Now, onto the good stuff, dancing and singing. So with dancing, we saw an endocannabinoid rise of 21% with a reported increase in mood. However, with singing, we saw a staggering 42% rise in endocannabinoids and a reported increase in mood, of course. Mama, I wanna sing. All right, so there are a few ways we can look at this. At first glance, a choir group that enjoys singing doesn't sound particularly all that shocking. Neither do runners who enjoy running. However, when you think about it, the exciting research that shows we could produce these endocannabinoids in our bodies ourselves, and it doesn't have to actually be from running, is staggering. It means that a bunch of research can now go on to look at many different activities that can produce this natural high. And the best thing for me at least is that while singing has shown that you can boost your endocannabinoids, it didn't actually mention that you have to be good at singing to actually get this natural high. So I can sing all I want to do. That last note was abysmal. That last note was wild. What key were you trying to sing? But waiting on the other side. Yeah. So there you go. A cheaper, easier, healthier, more legal way to get high. Social media is always blowing up with some new diet fad promising to change your life and transform your health.
It was the first time that I'd really understood that food could potentially have a powerful effect.
Paleo, keto, alkaline, eating clean, you name it, insert name here diet. Is there actually anything to them? Or is just a lot of this just BS? If you want to be really healthy, is it time to ditch the diets? Even from time to time, I get caught in the latest craze. I mean, trying to shred for summer, You've seen my beer pics. But sometimes it's hard to tell the facts from the fad. Miracle diets claiming to be based on science have been around for decades, but now new food books and social media are taking this to a whole new level. One of the diets that's been going around a lot is clean eating. I mean, clean eating alone on Instagram has 48 million posts. So what's this all about? Should we all be eating clean? So what does clean eating even mean? A lot of it's about, cutting out refined sugars and processed meat, eating a lot of veg, and sometimes even cutting out meat altogether. And this sounds pretty good, right?
Vegetables could be amazing things and they could have an impact on you that I would never even considered.
The person who was dubbed the Queen of Clean, who became a major face in this movement, is Deliciously Ella, who managed to transform her life from making a number of changes to her diet and lifestyle.
I had problems with my immune system and infections and then chronic fatigue. So I spent about 6 months or so in bed just taking all these drugs and they just didn't have enough effect.
She, like many others, has gone completely plant-based in order to improve her health, an idea which stems from one book.
The first book that I read was The China Study by Colin Campbell, which for me was really interesting. It was the first time that I'd really understood that food could potentially have a powerful effect.
What we learned was that diets that containing more animal proteins is associated with increase in cancer rates and heart disease rates.
To get these results, Professor Campbell looked at 6,000 people in China, but instead of measuring their animal product intake, he actually measured their cholesterol levels.
We had to look at it somewhat indirectly and comprehensively, and we learned, for example, that blood cholesterol was a pretty good indication. And that in turn was associated with the consumption of more animal protein.
So what he did here was use cholesterol levels as a measure for a disease. But we know cholesterol levels can be affected by many different things. So it's a real leap to say that animal products are completely bad for you.
What I say, this is the goal. And the reason I say it's the goal is not because we have all the science in. I just simply say this is the goal because as we proceed in that direction, I don't see harm occurring.
So basically what the science is saying is we should eat more vegetables. Agreed. But not to necessarily completely cut out an entire food group. The science is actually pretty complex, and your problem with complex is it doesn't often sell as well or come across as sweet on social media. And this is where we can get in trouble by running away with facts. And this is something that Ella agrees with too.
For me, plant-based is about based. Do you see what I mean? And therefore you add on to it, adapt it. It's about sharing recipes that start with a base of plants rather than it saying you can never do this ever again, which is not what I'm about by any shape or form. My problem with the word clean is that it's become too complicated, it's become too loaded. Clean now implies dirty, and that's negative. And we shouldn't have that. And I think it's sad to me that clean has been taken so far out of, I think, how it was originally meant to be used by people. As I said, I haven't used it, but as far as I understood it when I first read the term, it meant natural, kind of unprocessed. And now it doesn't mean that at all. It means diet, it means fad.
Like we know, diets come and go, and me, myself, I've been attracted to those get shredded quick diets to get ready for holiday. However, I've also seen the other side when dieting goes wrong. Sometimes studying these diets and taking them too seriously can have its own psychological effects, and this can lead to medical conditions such as anorexia and bulimia nervosa, and these are patients that I see in A&E. And sometimes the way these diets and fads start with real facts and sometimes actual principles can spiral and snowball and get passed around, and people can really misinterpret it. And social media is actually amplifying it and changing our relationship to food, and this can become dangerous. Even Deliciously Ella, who built a massive social media following talking about diets, has been able to appreciate the issues that can happen with social media and how you have to approach it with caution.
I think it's up to us to be as responsible as we can be to do everything to allow people not to take it out of context. To me, that doesn't stop at food, that's the whole of social media.
Another recent craze I've heard about in recent years is going gluten or grain-free. The idea that apparently cutting out grains makes us healthier. So it's a no-brainer, right? Should we all be going gluten-free? We've been eating gluten and grain for years. However, the gluten-free movement is massive, selling millions of books.
I saw too many people succumbing to the need for bypass surgery, stents, dying, sudden cardiac death, etc., heart attacks. So I asked my many patients to remove grains and sugars. Let's see what happens.
What he noticed seemed too good to be true.
Blood sugars dropped. Many diabetics became non-diabetic. Spectacular things happened.
Seems like a bit of a leap. Most of the science actually comes from a study in Italy. However, it doesn't exactly back all of Bill's claims.
I respect and like some of the aspects of Dr. Davis. So it's not that I'm an enemy or whatever. So of course I'll be ecstatic if he's right. But the answer is much more complex than you can imagine.
He found that gluten could be harmful to the gut in many people. However, this is actually people who've already had gut issues. These people tend to be celiac disease sufferers, people I tend to see in hospital.
Not everybody that eats gluten will be in trouble.
So even the scientists who this movement is based on doesn't completely support it.
It seems to be such a no-brainer question, but it's not.
I mean, many of these free diets, gluten-free, dairy-free, whatever-free diet, these are only really necessary for people who can't process whatever the intolerance is. And these are patients that I see. So when it comes down to it, 3 doesn't necessarily mean healthy. So my advice would actually be to make small incremental changes to your body and your lifestyle and your diet. Avoid crash dieting, avoid social media, avoid comparisons with people you don't even know, and just focus on yourself, on your body, doing small things to get better each and every day.
How do you make a cat go woof? Pour petrol on it and light it.
So laughter is a big part of my life. I mean, I love a good knee slapper, a good belly cruncher. Hey, even when a little bit of pee comes out sometimes, you can't really blame anyone.
2 monkeys in a bath. One says to the other, ooh, 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 ha, ha, ha. The other says, well, put the cold tap on then.
So what I want to know is laughter the ideal drug? During these strange times, I mean, we all need a good laugh to keep our mood up and to keep us positive. So wouldn't it be brilliant if we can actually bottle the effects that laughter gives us? Well, funnily enough, there's some research actually that's investigating whether or not we can have laughter in pill form. And it actually comes from a pretty weird source.
So you're hearing the squeaking through the ultrasound detector. One morning I woke up and said, what if that is laughter? And said, well, then you should be able to tickle animals. And we tickled the first rat, and they chirped like crazy. The second rat, as a matter of fact, every rat except some really neurotic ones.
So it might seem like these rats are actually crying for help, but in actual reality, these rats are having the time of their lives.
They are following my hand because it's a hand that has brought them great joy. I love rats. They're such fun animals, so smart and so emotional.
Panksepp believed that rats had similar emotions to humans.
I am trying to understand the animal mind as a way to illuminate the human mind. Animals that have been bred for high laughter are resistant to depression. That means they have chemistries that protect them against the vicissitudes of life. Animals that have been bred for low laughter are susceptible to depression.
He used the rat's laughter to identify the area of the brain involved in happiness. Scientists in Chicago used this to find a happiness neurotransmitter, GLX13, and then made this into a drug to stimulate that. A drug company then bought this for $560 million.
Surprising as it is, $560 million is not bad for buying the rights to the most powerful item on the horizon.
So honestly, when I first saw this study, I was thinking, yeah, laughter pill? But to be honest, this study actually got to the final stage of medical trials. And that in itself is a massive, massive achievement. So maybe there's something in it. Maybe the doors are open now to actually find out, can laughter be used as a chemical pill? So we all know the incredibly good vibes that laughter brings. So why does it actually feel so good? When you laugh, you release these chemicals called endorphins, and this is like a bit of a natural high. They're actually like natural pain relievers. So actually vision this, normally you're in pain, you take a pill to get rid of it, right? But imagine you're actually creating these chemicals within yourself just by laughing.
What we're doing here is we're looking to see whether pain threshold increases after you've laughed.
Now.
When you do the wall sit test the first time, you're really going to be feeling it. I remember doing this test when I was playing rugby back at school and it was not fun. You're really feeling the pain in your upper thighs. So the idea is when you have a good laugh, you release these endorphins, and so you're supposed to do the test again. But this time it actually increases your pain threshold and you won't feel as much pain, so you can actually last longer. I mean, well, that's a theory anyway.
Yes, you'd normally expect something between, on average, I don't know, about 5 seconds and anything up to 20 seconds increase in time, and that's pretty much what we have here.
So there you go, guys. Laughter actually produces these pain-killing chemicals called endorphins, and these give you an elation, a high, almost like when you bench your 1 rep max, or when you've eaten a food you liked, or when you're chilling with somebody you really enjoy. These natural pain-killing endorphins are kind of like opiate drugs, which is, you may know as like morphine or diamorphine, which take away pain and give some people a little bit of a loopy high feeling. Except with this, it's naturally produced in your body from laughter, and you don't get any of the side effects you would with those drugs that we'd prescribe you. So we know that laughter has a big impact for us, mentally and physically, but what does it do for us socially? Well, this is something that the scientists at the University of North Carolina have actually put to the test.
I was really interested in laughter because it seems like the kind of behavior that happens really frequently and is so relevant to the way that people think about their best relationships, and yet there was very little research on it.
They asked couples to have a chat together and they took a detailed look into how and when they laughed.
For this first interaction, we're interested in hearing about the first time you met.
What was the first thing you said to me?
I'm gonna marry you one day, and you said no.
So everyone can think of a time when they laughed with somebody. But we can also think of a time when we laughed at something, but the person next to us did not laugh.
You were expecting me to be boring?
You're a librarian.
My emails.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, but it was still a librarian. I'm sorry.
They then measured the amount the couples laughed at exactly the same time, and they found out it was actually surprisingly powerful.
So what we found was that moments of shared laughter actually are predictive of greater closeness and feeling more supported by one's partner. So those couples who laughed more tended to report more support and also generally feeling closer to their partner.
Just know that if you tell your partner a joke that you think's funny and you get crickets, chances are, guys, it's not gonna go very far. During the pandemic, we realized just how important social interactions are for our mental health. And now we realize just how important laughter is for our social interactions. So laughter goes way beyond us just having a physical release. Laughter is actually very important for our mental health, for our social interactions, and for our mood. So remember, when you can actually get out there and mingle with your friends again, you need to go out there and remind yourself just how important laughter is. Hey, and that's the doctor's orders. Oh.